Like yesterday, our gospel shows Jesus speaking to the crowds and to his disciples, denouncing the scribes and Pharisees, calling them brood of vipers, serpents. Strong language for Jesus. Let's remember, however, not only that this passage reflects conflicts with Pharisaic Judaism at the time, but also problems within Matthew's church, where members of the community displayed many of the same faults attributed to the Pharisees and scribes. The woes heard here are often found in prophetic and apocalyptic writings, decrying sins and anticipating punishment for these. As a counterbalance to the 9 Beatitudes found much earlier in Matthew, here is a series of 7 woes in which Jesus condemns actions and attitudes of the scribes and Pharisees, calling them hypocrites for neglecting matters of moral and religious importance, instead finding ways to aggrandize themselves. They clean the outside, and they leave the inside unclean. He notes that they extend tithing laws, neglecting what is important, that is, judgment and mercy and fidelity. They value appearances rather than inner purity. You cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of plunder and self-indulgence. Strong language, unlike the healing, loving, forgiving Jesus we see so often and turn to. I confess I've resisted attending to these woe statements in the past, partly because I couldn't see relationship to me and my relationship with God, and partly because they are a downer. I didn't want to think of Jesus so angry. What I missed, and you might perhaps also, is the rightness of his anger. He who so loved reached out to, healed, and forgave all those whom he touched physically and spiritually, must have been beyond appalled to see those who sought to follow God's rule so misused by their religious leaders. It would be a mistake to think this is intended solely for the Pharisaic audience or Matthew's community and not for us. What then might be the invitation for us? We might consider how we also are hypocritical, however distasteful that realization might be. Perhaps with others, but more importantly, within ourselves. We too may be focused on appearances without honoring our inner values in a way that only God can see. By looking carefully within, guided by God's grace, we may be able to evaluate how our actions align with our beliefs and where they don't. Said another way, we may be able to identify God's presence and invitations in our lives and our responses to God's nudgings as we live each day. One way to become aware of God's presence and his invitations is through an approach given to us in Ignatius of Loyola's Examen Prayer. St. Ignatius felt this daily prayer to be so important in the life of his Jesuits that it be prayed even if time for other prayer could not be found in a busy day. If prayed consistently, with God's grace, we may begin to see where we have remained faithful in our spiritual relationship with God, where we may have slipped, and how we might anticipate adjusting our actions to align more with our desire to love and serve the Lord, and to establish the reign of God in our lives. Let us pray then that we recognize in prayer God's presence in our lives each day, and that our actions speak louder than our words.